Gentle sacrifice. How good parents sacrifice their children daily on the altar to Satan without knowing it. Psalm 127, verse 3. Behold, children are an inheritance from Yahuwah. The fruit of the womb is his reward. Psalm 128, verses 1 through 4 and verse 6. Blessed are all who fear Yahuwah, who walk in his ways. Be blessed, and let it be well with you. Let your wife be as a fruit-bearing vine within your house, your sons like olive plants all around your table. Behold, so shall the man be blessed who fears Yahuwah, and let you see your children's children. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28. And Elohim said, Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping creatures that creep on the earth. And Elohim created the man in his image. Male and female he created them. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, Bear fruit, and increase, and fill the earth, and subdue it. Psalm 8, verse 2. Out of the mouths of babies and infants you have found a strength because of your adversaries, to put an end to enemy and avenger. Every child that is born from male and female human parents is in the likeness and image of the Creator. Thus from birth they become enemies of Lucifer. Each baby testifies to the beautiful nature and intelligence of his Maker. In this article, I am not going to give space to writing about diabolically evil parents who abuse their children, sadistically torture them, use them for sex slaves, or the ones who give birth to children for use and sacrifice to Satan, because they themselves are sex slaves of Satanists, or they are in league with Satan themselves. My purpose is not to take you through the horrors of what is being done to babies and children by diabolically evil people, but to point out to you how good-hearted people like you, innocently sacrifice their children to Satan by following the dictates of the culture we were raised in. In contrast, I will tell you a little of how a few deceived Muslim parents raised in their ancient cultural thinking think it an honor to sacrifice the children in order to blow up Jews in Israel for Allah's glory. Islam is more of a cultural, legal system of government than a religion. It is a system of control by the muftis under Islamic law, much of which is not attached to the Quran. That cultural history goes back into ancient times when their religion dictated that they offer their children in sacrifice to their gods, like Baal, Moloch, and Shamash. In the wilderness journey, the tribes of Israel were tempted by the beautiful women of pagan tribes they encountered and by their religions. In Leviticus 10, verse 25, Yahuwah says, "You shall not let any of your seed pass through the fire to Molech." Jeremiah 32, verse 35. They built the high places of Baal to cause their sons and daughters to pass through the fire to Molech, which I commanded them not, neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination. Before they entered the land and afterwards, the children of Jacob was named Israel by Yahuwah, had a strange attraction to offering their children into the iron hands of these fire-containing gods. When the house of Israel, the 10 tribes, split from the 3 tribes of Judea after Solomon's death and moved up to live in the north of the land, they continued their practices of child sacrifice. But the tribe of Judah, from which we get Jews, also sacrificed children to Moloch in the valley of Hinnom in Jerusalem, as the book of Jeremiah tells us. When the 10 northern tribes scattered into other nations for trade purposes with the Phoenicians, they took these wicked practices with them. When Yahuwah finally had to scatter the rest of them by 722 BCE into all nations among the Gentiles, they brought their abominations there too, idolatry and madness against their own children. Never really left their sin nature, though Christianity civilized them. Thus the Western culture continues in idolatry and rejection of the Torah of Yahuwah, the teachings and instruction of the kingdom of heaven for our life on earth to be good. The Torah puts the job of teaching the children how to be good citizens in the kingdom of heaven into the hands of the fathers. Because of lust for money and things, lust for position and prestige, advancement, control and power, which is all part of idolatry, children are left with babysitters, put in public schools and daycares afterwards, or preschools and nurseries, boarding schools or academies, so that idolatrous parents, driven by lust to accumulate wealth and rise the corporate ladder, can live the lifestyle they want unhindered by their children's needs. There is nothing or no one that can replace your parental love for your children. Those who love their children put them before advancement in the idolatrous, materialistic world. If you have to go from a $500,000 house to a 2-bedroom apartment so that mom can stay with the children and homeschool them, and dad can spend more time with them teaching them the word of Yahuwah, then do it. Isaiah 2, verses 2 through 22, tells us that Yahuwah will rise in wrath to bring down the pride of man and all of his idolatry. But realistically, it is better to remain without children than to be so selfish as to bring them into the world, only to abandon them for others to raise. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 7. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah our Elohim, Yahuwah is a God, and you shall love Yahuwah, your Elohim, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And the words that I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. The word Echad is a family word, a unity word, one in purpose and desire. Genesis 2, verses 22 through 24. And the rib which Yahuwah Elohim had taken from the man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one echad flesh. Genesis 1, verse 26. Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Messiah was begotten. He proceeded out of the center of Yahuwah and took form in order to one day come and die for us. Father and Son are echad, one in unity and purpose. Messiah said, I and the Father are one. Thus Elohim started with a family of two, with Adam and Eve, as Yahuwah is a family of two. Yahuwah the Father and Yahushua, Yahuwah the Son. Yah is the family name. I am. The principle of recreation by a seed is basic to his very nature. This is why the Luciferic world community loves to remove seeds from fruits and vegetables with genetic altering. This is why they are trying to create another race in their own image and trying to destroy Yahuwah's creation. Lucifer is his fallen angels, demons, and his human agents are dedicated to creating a world without Yahuwah or his Torah or his image to remind them of him. Malachi 4 verses 4 through 6. In the context of the second coming of Messiah as king, remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel, laws and right rulings. See, I am sending you Eliyahu the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yahuwah. And he shall turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with utter destruction. The teaching of the children by the fathers of his instructions must include teaching them to fear Yahuwah, obey Yahuwah, and love Yahuwah with all their heart, mind, and strength. The one thing that will keep Yahushua, as he returns with the wrath of Yahuwah, from totally destroying the world is that a remnant of Torah-observant people will be left on earth who will be teaching their children the Torah. The teachings and instructions of the kingdom of heaven found in the first 5 books of the Bible, turning their hearts to one another in the love of Yahuwah. It is the Torah guarding, set apart, pure of heart remnant that is the salt of the earth. In America, the divorce rate is reaching 60%. This is usually because both partners live by Greek love, which is a feeling that seeks gratification for its self-life, for its security and its self-esteem. Yet the word says to husband and wife, subjecting yourselves to each other in the fear of Yahuwah. There is almost no fear of Yahuwah to be found in the Western world. A vague concept of God can be taken or left, depending on how one feels. A vague concept of God can be taken or left, depending on how one feels. Hebrew understanding of love means to submit and lay down your life for the one loved. It involves commitment to a binding covenant and responsible, mature observance of that covenant of marriage. These principles are almost gone from American culture. An understanding of a covenant relationship is almost non-existent. If man and wife cannot keep covenant in a marriage, they won't keep covenant with Elohim either. The bride of Messiah obeys his commands without question or compromise and follows her lamb wherever he goes. In comparison, the divorce rate of the Orthodox Jews is so rare, it is less than 1%. Father admonishes us to embrace his culture, where relationships are based on covenants. From 167 BCE, under the Greek rule of Antiochus Epiphanes, who worked viciously at Hellenizing the Jews and who succeeded to some extent to Rome's emperor Hadrian in 133 CE, the hate for the Torah was made into law. Under the rule of both, no one was allowed to circumcise their boys, guard Shabbat, Sabbath, or the festivals, teach the Torah, or refuse to eat pork. In other words, obedience to Yahuwah was forbidden. Thus, these two cultures created a religion that also teaches that the Torah is obsolete and not to be obeyed. Christianity. Thus, the culture of Greece and Rome, with its religion passed down to us today with its disdain and mocking of the Torah of Yahuwah, and thus the Western culture fathers, except for a small remnant of Jews and Torah-guarding Messianic believers, no longer teach their children the Torah and have brought ruin upon their children. Since the 1960s, when prayer was taken out of school in America, Bible reading in class forbidden, witnessing about Jesus forbidden, speaking against sin forbidden, the rise in teen pregnancy, drug addiction, alcohol abuse, violence, and rebellion in general has been astronomical. The Bible and prayer were buffers for our children. Public school and all public media has programmed children into the idolatrous and rebellious culture of Greece and Rome. And today they are rebelling against all authority, their parents, teachers, the elderly, the police, and the governmental laws of the culture itself. Because the Torah has been removed from the exiled house of Israel, we have a large amount of children and youth that are rebellious, lawless, violent, and totally out of control. They mock at sin, mock goodness and purity, mock righteousness, mock parents and grandparents, and of course, mock God and the Bible. Besides the opening of a door to sexual license, the schools are now handing out condoms to children as young as 5th graders, and if the girls do get pregnant, they can go to an abortion clinic without their parents' permission. Our culture has opened doors for all types of sex-related diseases, venereal disease and AIDS, and the destruction of young adults' body, soul, and spirit. Mark 13, verse 12. And brother shall deliver a brother to death, and a father his children. And children shall rise up against parents and shall put them to death. What we have sown, we will reap. We have not brought our children into the discipline of the Torah, nor taught them to fear Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, because we haven't feared him. And we haven't feared him because we don't know him. Our religion was just that, a religion. Without God and his covenant, it is impossible to know him or to know his Messiah personally. We have taught our children the culture we were raised in, taken them to church, perhaps given them a lawless, Torahless religion that has told them the God of the Old Testament and his rules are not for today. Thus lawlessness has bred lawlessness, and both will reap the results. John 6, verse 45, Messiah said, "It has been written in the prophets, they shall all be taught by Yahuwah. Everyone then who has heard from the Father and learned comes to me." John 5, verses 46 to 47, the Messiah speaking, "If you believed Moses, you would have believed me, since he wrote about me. If you do not believe his writings, how shall you believe my words?" It is amazing that because Christians are taught to reject the Torah of Yahuwah, they do not obey the Messiah's words either. Very few Christians obey even the basics of what Jesus taught. This is why they feel no need to teach their children the word, for they don't study it themselves. Radical Muslims allow their children to blow themselves up for their God. This practice is a throwback to the worship of ancient familiar spirits of demons brought into today's world. The house of Israel, the 10 northern tribes that make up most of the people of the Western world, also had brought forward the familiar spirits of demons in today's sophisticated modern society, which are causing people to sacrifice their children to demons in a more subtle, respectable, gentle manner. The average Muslim does not want to sacrifice their child as a suicide bomber. Most don't even read the Quran. Most Arabs or Iranian, Farsi are family-loving people who just want to live like anyone else, raise their children, and be happy. Except for Satanists and Lucifer worshippers, the people of the Western world are horrified at child sacrifice. Yet, the United Nations funds children's suicide bomber camps in places like Gaza and the refugee camps of the West Bank, Samaria. Because of the mind programming they get in these children's camps, they willingly are ready to sacrifice themselves as martyrs for Allah. The word love does not appear in the Quran. The scriptures are the only book that teach us how to love Elohim and how to love our fellow man and how to raise our children in love. Muslim children in Israel are taught at a very young age how to throw stones at IDF soldiers. When older, they replace stones with hand grenades. When the IDF ruled Gaza, oftentimes in raiding villages, they would find weapons of all types in the walls and under children's beds. It is the same for their raids in Samaria, West Bank. Fadi, a young resident of Jenin in the West Bank, told the Hezbollah reporter that the explosives are designed to blow the soldiers' heads off. The next time they dare to enter our camp will be over our dead bodies. This kind of thinking gives prestige and identify to young Arab boys who are too often not loved by their fathers. From the age of 2, they have to learn to fight for themselves or be beaten up by older children. Once weaned from the breast, they learn to survive by experience. The Palestinian Authority, the one that America pours billions of dollars into and supplies with weapons, puts cartoons on TV designed to make children hate Jews. In their schools, they are never taught about the UN partition of Palestine giving the Jews their own land, but only taught that the land is theirs and that they have to take it back from the oppressors. Arabs who know the truth about what their own leaders are doing to stir up the trouble have to be quiet and play the game, or else they are murdered by their own people. Christian Arabs suffer silently and oftentimes are martyred. But American children are given video games to play that teach them how to kill others for pleasure and entertainment. Movies on TV show violence and death, and young boys are given toy guns. In Germany, there is a video game that teaches children to kill Jews. How do we, sophisticated people, sacrifice our children in respectable ways? by taking them away from the precious teachings of Yahuwah that will cause them to be wise, healthy, mature, and strong, and throwing them into the arms of Lucifer's people and his world system, people destined for the lake of fire. Lucifer's world is teaching children and youth to be dummies, controllable, lustful, whiny babies who demanding what they want or else. Orthodox Jews in the Western world continue on with Hebrew culture also. In general, look at their children. They are submissive to authority, hard-working, studious, learned, and bright. They are helpful, promoters of charity. They are clean, moral, and responsible. They are rarely put in jails or prisons for things they have done because their minds are not rebellious to laws, to instructions, and teachings of authority. They are law-abiding citizens. It is just that they prosper and advance because of their wisdom. A boy, before he takes his bar mitzvah at age 13, must memorize the book of Proverbs. Yahuwah says that when a boy can shave and a woman can conceive a child, they are adults. That is what he means when he says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Old is 13 for a boy and 12 for a girl. They are raised to be responsible adults at a young age. The Jews began training a son early for his bar mitzvah or a girl for her bat mitzvah. From the Lekarev report, Israel, Torah portion for Vayakra 1:1, Leviticus 1:1, even little children began their study of the Torah and Vayakra. Can you imagine that? Beginning to teach the Torah from Leviticus to little children? Of course, it teaches them the basics about sin and rightness and submission to the teachings of Yahuwah and what he requires for their salvation. It gives them correct thought that produces responsible, mature people. There is no teenage separation in Yahuwah's culture. The singling out of the teenage was an invention by clothes marketers around 1950 to separate those from 13 to 19 and keep them in childhood without mature responsibility. It is during these years that Luciferic mind programming has been so successful in creating rebellious bullies and brats filled with lust, pride, and all sorts of wickedness, training them in globalism, evolution, and disrespect for authority. Instead of maturing them, the mind programming has given them license to commit fornication, take drugs and sell drugs, get drunk, lie, steal, cheat, and even beat up old men and women for fun. But the blame is squarely on the parents who turn them over to these programmers, public schools, TV, video games, CDs, etc., because they were too busy making money to teach their children in their homes, like the Bible tells us to, and Hebrew culture dictates. Those youth who are homeschooled and taught the Bible, especially the ones who are taught the Torah, are responsible, mature, kind, thoughtful, respectful, and hard-working people fit to be good citizens in society. It is generally known that the public schools purposely are dummying up American youth so that they know very little except to do as they are told. Our youth are being programmed to give back the desired responses programmed into them. Parents who are so into their own agendas and selfish ambitions will reap what they sow. If you can't train your child in the way he should go when he is old, teenage, he will depart from truth and perhaps turn you into the authorities to please some hero in the military. It is best not to have children if you can't train them in the Torah, because the Torah is what restrains the forces of anti-Messiah, the Torah, the teachings, and the instructions of the kingdom of heaven of Yahuwah's people on earth. And Michael, the archangel of Israel, Once the Torah is forced underground by the anti-Messiah, the lawless one, and Michael stands off to the side as per Daniel 12 verse 1, then we will have Satan in flesh on the Temple Mount. 2 Thessalonians 2nd chapter. Most good parents think they are doing right by enrolling their children in sports and clubs and popular kid groups. But too often pressure is put on young children to succeed in sports. This often affects their way of looking at themselves. If they are good at the game, they are honored. If they are mediocre at the game, they feel bad about themselves. Where does the Word teach us to put our children into competitive situations against other people's children? That is a Greek-Roman thing. Sports figures were gods in those cultures. Today, children make gods out of movie idols, sport figures, superheroes, and singers. Young girls take role models from people such as Hannah Montana, who was recently found to have posed in the nude. She's still a teenager. TV programs like American Gladiator and American Idol make children want to fight like the gladiators or be famous like the singing performers. The American gladiators are big-sized people. They have super strength, and they are portrayed like the ancient pagan gods of Greece and Rome, like Zeus and Jupiter, Mars and Hercules. We are in the days of Noah and the Nephilim of Genesis 6:2 and 4 and Numbers 13, verses 31 to 33 are back. The giants. Children and adults give honor to these gladiators as superheroes, just like they did before the flood of Noah. Your children are being set up to follow the coming powerful human-demon mixtures, thinking they are superheroes. Children see women in very immodest clothes everywhere they go, even in church. So lust begins early. Lust begins with the eyes, just as Eve saw the tree of Lucifer, that it was good. Yahuwah's tree is not a mixture of good and evil. It is pure good, the highest good. The internet is the full blooming of the tree of the knowledge, gnosis of good and evil. Stay off the internet unless the Spirit of Yahuwah has you look for something he wants you to see. Then get off of it. Don't let your children have access to it except under strict guidance. What you may not know is that the TV and internet are also transmitting hidden messages to the subconscious. Unless you are led by the Spirit of Yahuwah, you won't be protected by the Spirit of Yahuwah, and the demonic spirits will have every right to come into your house via media and destroy your family. Another thing to be aware of is the subtle programming of competitive games, whether sports or video games. It causes your children to choose sides, to choose who they want on their team or what team to join for their own advantage. Of course, they are taught not to choose children on the team that may be detrimental to winning. Winning is the ultimate thing in the satanic world. You and your children are driven by this principle many times without knowing it. Siding with those who will make you successful is smart in today's society. The infirm and old are considered beneath the young and strong. Thus, the mindset is there for the killing of the old and infirm in the days to come because they are non-productive. You can see the curse that was put on Noah's son Ham because he dishonored his father, Genesis 9, verses 22 through 26. And the honor given to Shem, from which came Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because he restored honor to Noah. In virtual reality games, oftentimes children are required to choose who will live and who will die for the good of the group. Young children making these decisions cause them to be hardened and sadistic in their adult years. From Marlon Meadows' novel, The Seal of Gaia, page 283. Speaking of the virtual reality games, the virtual reality of the psycho games is intended to blur the lines between illusion and fact in the pliable mind of the child. However, the emotions, the stories produced in the child were real and served as a path for intrusion into his inner thoughts, belief system, and worldview. It is from this data that the master computer compiles his next level of indoctrination. At the end, he would conform to the mandatory outcomes, or he would simply be recycled again and again through the system. If any child did not respond willingly, he would also be subjected to a series of drugs known as personality helpers, comprised of a variety of psycho-balanced drugs that alter human emotions. Another family of drugs known as psycho-awareness drugs were used to induce alternative states of consciousness in those who were resistant to spirituality. Touted as beneficial, drug therapy was one of the government's most powerful and effective weapons of control. Right now in some states, doctors and or the school system is ready to chip your child. All public schools demand children to be vaccinated before entering school. Many schools are also ready to make sure your child is on mind-controlled drugs, receive their allotment of condoms, and are obedient citizens of a fascist state that is Nazi-based. America is fast becoming a fascist state. The Creator sides with those who are poor, humble, and who tremble at His word. Question motives, question messages, question everything that the world throws at you, but don't talk at the Spirit's commands. Isaiah 66, 1 through 2. 1 John 3, verse 4. Sin is the transgression of the Torah. The word transgression means to rebel, to revolt, to break away from, to become an apostate. Unless the fathers turn the hearts of their children to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and teach them the Torah of Yahuwah, the children will be lost. John Quincy Adams was our 6th president, March 18, 25 to March 4, 1829, from Steve Quayle's book, Giants, page 188, speaking of public schools that purposely dummy up children. For example, John Quincy Adams, at the ripe old age of just 14, was the United States ambassador to Russia. Adams spoke and wrote 5 languages and was sufficiently competent in the philosophy of government to represent American interests in a foreign court. And he does not appear to have been considered an exceptional child by his peers. Try not to shut up involuntarily when thinking about taking a 14-year-old student out of one of our public schools and sending him to Russia to present America today. I dare say the average 14-year-old public school child in America today is barely literate in one language and probably would be lucky if he could tell you what continent Russia was on, let alone located on the map without a lot of honey. This type of student is a product of a system intent on keeping each citizen ignorant so that he won't sense the invisible cage he is placed in. The students are trained to parrot unquestionably. My brothers and sisters, we are in the days of the dry tree, when the Torah is despised and Yahuwah's ways are ignored and rejected by those who believe the Bible as well as those who do not, when hearing truth is rare and the Bible is considered as a hate crime book. Messiah Yahushua, on his way to his death cavern, his stake, said to those weeping for him, "Weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and your children. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in a dry? For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear, and the breast that never gave suck." America, England, and the world as a whole is being taken over by satanic-minded people and mixture creatures of all sorts that have no conscience. They think no more of their child than they do a cockroach. In America, we live in a lollipop bubble where reality is blurred and our minds are dulled. The only thing that will break us loose from this hypnotic state is to baptize our mind into the word of Yahuwah and obey it, Romans 12, verse 2. There is a strong movement worldwide called the environmental movement of ecology. Most of us think this is a side issue that is not very important to learn about. But it is going to be the reason for taking you from your home and sticking you into a city center, taking all the land outside cities and making them wilderness land owned by the U.S. government and the UN, called the Wilding of America, so that the spotted owl, the rattlesnake, the raccoons, bear, and deer can have your land. It is officially called the Wild Lands Project. This comes from the core of it all, deep ecology, which says all life, whether human or non-human, is of equal value. Resource consumption should be limited to vital human needs, with anything more than that being immoral. The human population should be reduced. That is really saying that non-human life is more important than human life. Therefore, if you live on a piece of property where a snake might live and you are fencing in your property, they say we are talking PhDs here, that you are psychologically harming the snake by restricting his territory. Think that's stupid? You're right, it's stupid. But already an American business that fenced their property to keep rattlesnakes out was forced to remove the fence because of psychological damage to the snakes, whose freedom to roam had been restricted. But you and your children have been programmed into this thinking since the 1940s, giving human emotions and mental abilities to animals via cartoons, books, TV movies, and toys. Therefore, laws have actually been made and enforced in America that give a rattlesnake more freedom than the owner of a business to fence in his property to protect themselves from the snakes. These are reasons that you will be given for taking everything from you and herding you into a sustainable development corral policed by foreign troops, while the outside world of animals, insects, reptiles, and arachnoids is free to roam. Children and adults are now being dehumanized and programmed to accept these things when the takeover happens. The Greenpeace agenda is very subtle, being taught in many ways in our culture. Al Gore, favorite of millions, is an avid worshiper of Mother Gaia, Mother Earth. His environmental agenda is just as described above. He promotes deep ecology. He and the world community in general are working for these goals. Watch his position in politics in the future.